On an average July afternoon, a cruise passenger arrives in Southeast Alaska, joins a kayak excursion advertised as gentle and scenic, and within the hour is struggling in dangerously cold water with no understanding of what is happening to her body. This is the ordinary shape of how the Tongass National Forest kills people, and it happens with a regularity the tourism industry has no incentive to advertise. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people visit the Tongass National Forest, the largest national forest in the United States, covering 16.7 million acres of Southeast Alaska. Most leave with photographs of glaciers and bald eagles, but hidden behind those photographs is a pattern of death and near-death that rarely makes the brochures. The Tongass is larger than 10 U.S. states combined, larger than 75 UN member nations, and within its boundaries, the forest kills with a quiet, mechanical consistency that has nothing to do with the bears everyone is told to fear. This perception gap is dangerous. The Tongass is a temperate rainforest stretching across 11,000 miles of coastline, with rainfall ranging from 26 inches a year in the north to 225 inches on Baranof Island. It contains the highest density of brown and black bears on Earth. It floods, slides, and chills its visitors without warning, hiding its dangers behind a facade of cruise ship accessibility that lures unprepared tourists into one of the most physiologically unforgiving environments in North America. The illusion of safety begins the moment a ship arrives. Waterfronts, gift shops, shuttle buses. The infrastructure suggests civilization, control, safety. The Tongass has been packaged as a destination so successfully that millions forget they're stepping into a landscape that has been killing humans for as long as humans have lived near it. But the forest doesn't care about a shore excursion schedule. The first illusion is how mild conditions appear. The air near town might read 60 degrees with a breeze and light mist. A summer day in the Tongass looks nothing like a summer day anywhere most tourists have lived, and that gap is where people die. A comfortable walk in a light jacket is, physiologically, a slow-motion immersion in conditions the body wasn't built to tolerate. Cotton soaked by drizzle and worn against 55-degree air with wind off the water becomes a heat extraction system, insulating at essentially 0% once wet. Most visitors don't own base layers or wool. Most visitors packed for a cruise, not a wilderness. Their luggage is calibrated for the ship's dining room, not the forest floor. The problem isn't that these visitors are uninformed in general. It's that the information they've received is specifically miscalibrated for this environment. Most people understand sun exposure, dehydration, altitude. These are hazards that travel writing and outdoor marketing discuss regularly because they affect environments that large numbers of recreational tourists visit. The Tongass's primary hazard, ambient cold in a persistently wet, windy environment, acting on inadequately insulated bodies over a period of hours, is almost never discussed in the context of cruise ship shore excursions because it doesn't fit the marketing frame of a premium wilderness experience. The second illusion is accessibility. Kayak tour companies advertise calm, scenic paddles through protected waterways. Visitors assume that a licensed company means forgiving water, not realizing it sits between 40 and 50 degrees year-round, regardless of how calm the surface looks. The third is timing. A storm can roll in off the Gulf of Alaska in under an hour, and a slope that has held for centuries can fail in under a minute. The forest doesn't announce these transitions, it simply executes them. These three illusions compound each other. A visitor who feels comfortable trusts the licensed kayak company and reads the calm afternoon as a guarantee has stacked 3 false signals before ever touching the water. None of them describe the environment. They describe its marketing. And the compounding effect is important. A visitor who held only one of these illusions might self-correct when conditions changed. A visitor who holds all 3 is not looking for signs of danger because every signal their brain is processing has already told them they're safe. Hypothermia doesn't arrive with warning lights. It begins as mild confusion, slightly clumsy hands, a feeling of being a little cold but essentially fine. This is the stage where people make the decisions that determine whether they survive, and the stage where the impairment itself prevents them from recognizing what is happening. By the time someone is shivering violently, they are already in serious danger. This entire sequence can unfold on an unremarkable summer afternoon that looked entirely benign. The physiology matters here because it explains why people don't simply turn around when they get cold. Mild hypothermia, a core temperature between 95 and 98 degrees Fahrenheit, produces cognitive effects that are nearly indistinguishable to the victim from ordinary tiredness. Thinking slows, judgment degrades, reaction times increase. These are the same effects produced by moderate alcohol consumption, and just as a moderately drunk person typically does not recognize their impairment, a mildly hypothermic person typically does not recognize theirs. They feel vaguely off, but attribute it to normal exertion, cold air, a long day. They don't recognize themselves as being in a medical situation because their brain no longer has the processing capacity to make that assessment accurately. This is where the forest begins to kill. On a summer afternoon, a kayak tourist who has never been told what cold water does to the body ends up in the water in a narrow channel. She did everything the tour company suggested, wore the splash jacket, listened to the briefing. Within moments of entering the water, involuntary gasping sets in, a reflex called cold shock that causes a sharp inhalation regardless of whether her head is above or below the surface. If this happens while submerged, drowning can occur before there's time to process what's happening. Multiple documented cases describe kayakers who did not survive this initial window. Cold water kills through mechanisms most visitors don't understand. The first stage, cold shock, lasts roughly a minute. Gasping, hyperventilation, a heart rate spike, dangerous for anyone with a cardiac condition. The second, swimming failure, sets in within 3 to 30 minutes as muscle coordination deteriorates. Swimmers who could cover hundreds of meters in a pool can no longer keep their head above the surface. The third, true hypothermia, takes 30 minutes or more, and according to the National Center for Cold Water Safety, 75% of cold water immersion deaths occur before this stage is ever reached. What makes this especially dangerous is that the stages don't feel sequential from the inside. The window from being fine to being unable to keep one's head above water can pass in under 5 minutes, faster than most people can process that a routine excursion has become a medical emergency, let alone signal for help. The math underlying these stages is unforgiving in a way that has nothing to do with fitness, swimming ability, or experience. Water conducts heat away from the body approximately 25 times faster than air of the same temperature. A swimmer in 50-degree water loses heat at a rate the human metabolic system cannot compensate for, regardless of how physically fit that swimmer is. The Tongass waters are not 50 degrees because of an anomalous season or an unusual current. They are 50 degrees because the entire inside passage, fed by glaciers, shaded by terrain, and refreshed by consistent cold inflow from the Gulf of Alaska, has been at this temperature for geological ages. It is not a temporary condition that a warm summer week changes. It is the baseline. The tides compound the danger invisibly. Southeast Alaska's tidal range can reach 20 feet, and the currents needed to move that volume through narrow island channels can overwhelm even strong paddlers. An incident there isn't just a cold water emergency, it's a cold water emergency combined with a current that has no regard for the tour company's itinerary. A swimmer fighting swimming failure while being pushed by a tidal current away from the nearest shore faces a compound problem that even trained rescue swimmers find difficult to address. The window is short. The current makes it shorter. But weather and water are predictable compared to what happens when soil, rain, and gravity combine on a slope that has held for centuries and then doesn't. Move inland and the danger changes shape, not size. In August 2024, a landslide in Ketchikan killed a city worker during a rainstorm that was, by Southeast Alaska standards, unremarkable. 2.6 inches over 36 hours. The slide ran 1,100 feet from 650 feet of elevation and arrived within seconds, with no warning. Dozens of homes were evacuated. The worker had lived beside that slope his entire life. It simply hadn't failed before. Landslides have killed 12 people in Southeast Alaska over a single recent decade. The forest sits on terrain carved by glaciers, where thin organic soil rests on steep bedrock with limited ability to hold water, and every major rainfall event loads those soils further. Alaska's statewide landslide inventory already contains more than 10,000 documented events, and researchers note the state is still in the early stages of understanding where the next failure will occur compared to nations like Norway and Switzerland. The geological explanation for this is straightforward, and the straightforwardness of it makes it more troubling, not less. When glaciers retreated from Southeast Alaska at the end of the last ice age, they left behind terrain that was oversteepened, slopes cut more sharply vertical than would form through ordinary erosion. These slopes have been loading with organic material ever since, building thin soils over bedrock at grades that, in a drier climate, would erode harmlessly. In the Tongass, where 200+ inches of rain a year are not unusual, these soils regularly become fully saturated. A saturated soil on an oversteepened glacial slope is a landslide waiting for the rainfall event that exceeds its last threshold. Every storm is a test. Most storms, the slope passes. Eventually, one doesn't. What makes landslide risk especially hard to communicate is its invisibility. A slope about to fail looks, in the moments before, exactly like every other slope in the forest. There is no posted sign because the science of predicting which hillside moves on which afternoon doesn't exist at that resolution. This is not a gap that engineering or monitoring can entirely close. Even in Switzerland, where slope monitoring is among the most sophisticated in the world, surprise events still occur. In the Tongass, where the monitoring baseline is still being established, the gap is considerably wider. Now consider the bears, because they are real, and because the fear they generate is almost entirely misdirected. The Tongass has the highest density of black and brown bears found anywhere in the world. Roughly 3,000 brown bears inhabit Southeast Alaska, concentrated on the ABC Islands, Admiralty, Baranof, and Chichagof, alongside approximately 10,000 black bears across the region. These bears use the same stream beds, trails, and berry patches that human visitors walk through daily during tourist season. A bear encounter in the Tongass is not a rare or surprising event. It is a routine feature of moving through the forest, and it does require knowledge and attention. Between 2000 and 2017, Alaska recorded 246 fatalities from cold temperature exposure and only 10 from bear attacks. The animal every visitor fears killed fewer people across nearly 2 decades than hypothermia kills in a single difficult season. The wet, 55-degree air of an ordinary July afternoon has killed more Alaskans by a wide margin than every recorded grizzly attack in the state's history combined. Tour operators spend considerable time briefing visitors on bear safety, food storage, encounter behavior, bear spray. Almost none of that briefing time goes toward cold water immersion, even though hypothermia is, by a wide statistical margin, the more likely killer. The forest has successfully redirected most visitors' fear toward its least dangerous resident. The psychological mechanism behind this misdirection is well understood. Bears are what researchers call a dread risk, a hazard that triggers visceral, instinctive fear because it involves the possibility of being killed by a predator, a threat humans evolved to attend to with priority. Cold water, hypothermia, and landslides are what researchers call a statistical risk, diffuse, probabilistic, operating on physiological timescales rather than the immediate fight-or-flight frame. People are consistently worse at assessing statistical risks than dread risks, even when the statistical risk is far more likely to actually harm them. The Grand Canyon's equivalent is lightning versus snakebite. Snakebite deaths in the canyon are extremely rare, but visitors frequently ask rangers about snake safety and rarely ask about lightning protocols, even though lightning is the far more significant cause of death in that environment. The Tongass also carries dangers that require no movement at all, nothing but the act of eating or drinking what looks, to an untrained eye, like abundance. Shellfish sit visibly exposed along the shoreline at low tide. Glacial runoff looks as clean as water can look. Both appearances are traps. Paralytic shellfish poisoning caused by saxitoxin-producing algae that shellfish concentrate in their tissue has caused confirmed fatal cases throughout southeast Alaska. A single 2011 outbreak produced 21 confirmed or probable cases in 2 months, and 20% of respondents in one survey of coastal Alaska Native communities reported a personal history of exposure. The streams that look most pristine are exactly the ones the Forest Service warns visitors to treat before drinking, because Giardia, spread through the region's beaver population, contaminates water regardless of how clear it appears. What makes PSP especially dangerous is its speed and its mimicry of other conditions. Paralytic shellfish toxin begins affecting the nervous system within 30 minutes of ingestion. The first symptoms, tingling in the lips and fingertips, are easy to dismiss as cold-related sensitivity. Within hours, the toxin can cause respiratory paralysis. There is no antidote. Treatment is supportive. Keep the person breathing until the toxin clears, which requires immediate medical access that the Tongass's geography routinely cannot provide. Someone who harvests shellfish on the outer coast and begins showing symptoms an hour later faces a medical emergency in one of the most remote environments in North America. In September 1971, Alaska Airlines Flight 1866 crashed into the Tongass, killing all 111 people aboard. The crash site sits inside the forest's boundaries to this day, and the conditions that made rescue difficult then are largely unchanged. Roughly 40% of the Tongass is rock, ice, wetland, or open water. Road access is minimal, and weather routinely grounds aircraft for days. If something goes wrong deep inside, the realistic response window is hours and days, not minutes. Rescue teams did not reach the Flight 1866 crash site for hours after impact. In the intervening time, the terrain, the weather, and the sheer scale of the Tongass combined to make a rapid response impossible, not because of any failure of effort or equipment, but because the environment itself does not permit rapid response. That has not changed in the half-century since. Search and rescue operations in the Tongass today face the same fundamental constraints: aircraft limited by ceiling and visibility, ground access limited by the absence of roads, and a landscape so vast that the meaningful question in many operations is not whether rescue is possible, but whether it will arrive before the environment finishes what it started. This response gap connects every danger described so far: a cold water incident, a landslide, a shellfish poisoning episode. None are necessarily fatal if competent medical attention arrives within the golden hour emergency medicine relies on elsewhere. In the Tongass, that hour routinely doesn't exist. The illusion operating across every one of these dangers is the same illusion that operates at the Grand Canyon and at every landscape packaged as accessible wilderness tourism. Infrastructure signals safety even when it has no bearing on the underlying environment. A dock, a printed shore excursion schedule, a paved trailhead, these import the psychological logic of a visitor center into terrain that has never operated by those rules. The presence of other tourists creates a false sense of security. A licensed tour operator suggests the underlying risk has already been managed. It hasn't. This isn't a failure of judgment. It's a structural mismatch between how human risk perception evolved and what an environment like the Tongass demands. We're calibrated to read crowds and infrastructure as safety signals. Southeast Alaska doesn't reward that calibration. The water is exactly as cold whether other kayaks are nearby or none. The slope doesn't know the parking lot at the trailhead was paved last year. Most Grand Canyon deaths don't happen to people who chose to do something dangerous. They happen to people who did not recognize that what they were doing was dangerous. The same is true in the Tongass. The tourist who joins a licensed kayak excursion on a mild July morning is not making a reckless choice by any normal standard. She's done exactly what the tourism infrastructure invited her to do. The dangerous choice, the one that matters physiologically, was not bringing proper protection or not understanding what 50-degree water does to the human body in the first 90 seconds of exposure. That choice was made, invisibly, long before she ever reached the water. The Tongass does not adjust its rainfall for anyone's vacation schedule. It does not reduce its tidal current for the afternoon excursion. It maintains today the same conditions that have shaped its ecology for millions of years, conditions that make it one of the most biologically rich temperate rainforests on the planet, and that, with the same indifferent consistency, kill unprepared visitors who arrive holding the wrong assumptions about what kind of place they've stepped into. The deaths and near-deaths that occur here are not reserved for extreme adventurers attempting something unreasonable. They are the ordinary, predictable consequence of ordinary tourists encountering an extraordinary environment without the physiological understanding it demands. The cold water doesn't know a kayaker is on a half-day excursion. The slope above Ketchikan didn't know a city worker was just clearing a drain. The forest is not trying to kill anyone. It is simply being itself. 16.7 million acres of temperate rainforest where it rains up to 225 inches a year, where bears fish the same streams tourists paddle through, and where the water beneath a calm summer kayak tour is cold enough to stop a swimmer's coordinated movement within minutes. It doesn't care about your cruise itinerary. It never did. Subscribe for more. The wilderness doesn't warn you, but this channel does.